I've been thinking a lot recently about Christianity, not just because it's Easter, but because the apparent resurgence we're being told is happening. And I just wanted to share some of my thoughts on this. As someone who studied the Bible for 11 years as an adult, I was christened Anglican, but only because my family apparently had an argument with a priest. Most of my family are actually Catholic. I'm not too sure what the ins and outs of that argument was, but needless to say, it resulted in us taking a little bit of a different direction. And then I became a Jehovah's Witness, which I was for 11 years. Yeah, I was one of those irritating people that used to knock on your door in the morning and ask you questions that you really didn't want to be asked. Although, to be fair, what I would say is they really don't do it to irritate people. They feel that it's their moral obligation. Anyway, getting back on track. Through my study of the Bible, and I guess one of the reasons why I do align with Christian values, although I think that their similar values are preached in every religion. I don't think it's unique to Christianity. But obviously it's the faith that I can speak to because it's the one that I know very, very well. And for me, Christianity was all about Jesus's teachings, to whether it's a golden rule of do unto others as you'd have them do to you, to love your neighbour as yourself, the fact that he stood with the marginalised, with the oppressed, with the poor. He really supported actually women. He didn't judge. And he wasn't afraid to stand up to the state and to the system. He believed in wealth redistribution. That's just fact. Those are just facts. If you want the scriptures, I'm always very happy to share which particular ones they are. But these are things. He gave out free healthcare. He wasn't afraid to call out the religious leaders for the hypocrites that they were, those who were supposed to be leading people, but actually showed no mercy to individuals who would judge the lowly, who would defraud them. And it was for this reason that he was targeted. We can talk about the prophecy around that being something that was going to happen, him being killed, as cited in the Old Testament. But it doesn't change the fact that he was targeted because he was radical, because he said things that the religious leaders didn't like. And that is why he was nailed to the stake. So why is this relevant now? Because most of the so-called Christianity that I am witnessing, to me, bears no resemblance to those teachings of Jesus. If you look at Trump and Vance, who have created, I guess, probably the most religious government, if you're going to look at it in terms of what they're saying, but it bears no actual resemblance to Christianity. They might have the label of Christianity, but what we're seeing, and we see this with Russell Brand, is a form of Christian fascism. And of course, again, it's not the only religion that goes down this route. We can see this, whether it's with ISIS, whether it's with the Jewish messianic extremists, whether it's with the Buddhist nationalists, or name any religion, the Hindutva. So it isn't unique to Christianity. But again, I can speak to Christianity because I know it, the teaching, so well. And what that Christian fascism is an inversion of Christianity. And that includes its support for Israel as it commits genocide, as it commits apartheid, continues an illegal occupation and siege. So I put this out to all the Christian Zionists. And the ones that break my heart the most are those from the African continent who really have been hoodwinked individuals and communities that themselves have been victims of the worst of settler colonialism. And a question I put to you is, which of the scriptures do you think it is that you're applying as you support Israel as it commits these crimes? How can you possibly connect Jesus' teaching of standing with the marginalized and the oppressed with these crimes against humanity? There is no resemblance between Christian Zionism and Christianity. I really believe that Christianity is a verb. And not just because I believe it, but if we were going to look at the Bible, Jesus said to them in Matthew 7 that many of you will say that you did all these wonderful things in my name, all these great works, and I will say to you, get away from me, you workers of lawlessness. Now, why did he say that? Because it wasn't about the labels that people applied to themselves. It wasn't even knowing about the specific laws. So in that time, it would have been the Mosaic law, which, by the way, that covenant came to an end if you're a Christian, because it said it was nailed to the stake. And that's why it no longer became about the circumcision, the literal circumcision, but the circumcision of the heart. That's why in Romans, I think it talks about there being no superiority of the Jew over the Greek, because it all became about the heart condition. So he said, by their fruits you will know them, not by their words. So I really think that we have to consider these things when people think about, because I see this in my own community, people that are becoming more and more religious, going to church, which I have no problem with. I think people should worship if it is something that helps them and supports them. And goodness knows we need help and support at this time in our collective history that just feels so incredibly dark. But what I'm witnessing through this is them turning away from standing with the oppressed and trying to find and trying to hide behind their so-called Christianity. And I think it's despicable. I really think it's such an inversion, again, of what Christianity is, what Christianity taught, what Jesus taught. So I think they really need to be thinking about this. Because if they actually want to be on the right side of Jesus, if you believe him to be the Son of God or God himself, whatever your view of that might be, then surely we should be aligning with his actual teachings. The actual teachings of Jesus should be the measuring rod, not some individual claiming that Israel has a right to do what it does because of history and some tenuous link with the land 3,000 years before. And on that subject, I think that if we were going to go down the route if we're claiming to be Christian and we're going to go down this route of God's support for what Israel is doing, then I think you've forgotten the scriptures when Jesus said that their house was abandoned to them and how he wanted to gather them as a hen gathers her chicks, but they didn't want it, and how they abused the prophets and killed the prophets, etc. Now, I'm not going down that route because I don't think Jews should be held responsible for something that really can't be proven. But if you are going to use religious books to justify, as a Christian, what is happening now, then you're in the wrong part of the Bible, in all honesty. Do you honestly believe that Jesus or God is going to reward you for supporting the shredding and burning alive of babies and civilians? Do you honestly believe that? How can you possibly think that there will be any reward from that? And if you think you're doing something that God has told you to do, then you really ought to be considering which God it is that you're following. And as I think about that, I just want to remind people that the Bible said it would be the meek that would inherit the earth. And it also said that the world was in the hands of the wicked one. Like, literally said that. Remember that when Jesus was being tempted after his days of fasting in the desert, and he was being tempted by the devil, one of the things that was offered to him was all the kingdoms of the world for an act of worship. Jesus at no point said to, or replied to Satan that he had no authority to do this, which he would have done, because we know from the other things that he said at different points in time, according to the Bible scriptures. He recognised that Satan had the authority to offer him that. So again, you seem to be confused about what the Bible teaches. So as I finish this, because this is a pretty long video, but I really felt the need to make it, because I think what we're seeing is a grotesque warping of the teachings of Christianity to justify the most horrific crimes. But whether we're looking at the New Testament or the Old Testament, I'd like to remind people of what it says in Psalm 72, 12 to 14. And I'll invite you guys to look that up. But regardless of whether we have belief, faiths or not, and I don't prescribe to any particular one, although I do prescribe to values, think about, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you think would benefit all of us? What kind of world do you want? And if you believe in a loving higher being, what do you think it is that they're asking of you? Because it certainly isn't what we're witnessing in the rise of this fascist, warped Christianity that Vance and Trump, Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson, and others are selling to you. So whether you care about the Palestinians or the oppressed or not, maybe you just care about your own souls. Just think about that. Are you really saving them? Supporting this grotesque, evil genocide?